Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Church on the Green, located in New Haven, Connecticut. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are invited and welcome. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Church on the Green, please visit our website at unitednewhaven.org. Thank you.
All right, good morning. My name is Tisha Pittman, and I am the deacon here at United. And our reading will be coming from two sections today. The first will be Isaiah chapter 2, verses 2 through 5. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many people shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord." Our second section will be coming from Mark chapter 8, 31 through 38. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with the disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." God is still speaking, and I hope he continues to speak to us all. Amen.
Amen. The words of the prophet Isaiah from about 2,700 years ago. "They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. May it be so."
Amen.
Well, thank you, Pastor Bonnie, for inviting me to speak here. It's taken me a while to get here. I had a detour through a hospital and a long convalescence. But it is also fortuitous that I get to be here today, when you are so deeply connecting to the roots of your community of faith and its history and its life of ministry, as well as looking forward in hope to the future that you and God are creating for United Congregational Church. It's a great day, and a great day to be with you. And yet, we live in a time of not yet. We humans have not done well transforming swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. We live in a society that is racked with violence, and gun violence in its many forms. Domestic violence, gang violence, suicide, mass shootings, all of that. Gun violence destroys lives and the soul of our communities. We are continually in active grief for those who have been killed. Nearby, like Tariq Kays, a 14-year-old teenager from New Haven who was killed on Bassett Street last July. And far away, like the 17 people we've just remembered by name, who were killed at Mary Douglas Stoneham High School just last week. Every death diminishes us. So let me start by telling you how I got here and why I'm committed to this ministry. It's the story of two children, about the same age as the children who were gathered here this morning. And it's the story of a Christian community in Mozambique that has taught me never to stop praying and working for peace, no matter what the obstacles. In March of 1994, 7-year-old Marcelina Delgado was shot and killed as she slept in the back seat of her father's car. Her family were on the way to visit her grandmother in a housing project in Hartford. They were bringing her a gallon of milk. And as they were parked on the street, gunmen in a car came abreast to her father's car and opened fire. Marcelina's father was seriously wounded. Her mother and siblings were able to get out of the car and survived. Marcelina, in the back seat, was shot and killed. The gunmen were caught, and they were convicted of the crime. They thought the car belonged to a member of a rival gang, and they thought that that was a sufficient excuse. I didn't live in Hartford at the time. Actually, I was the priest at Trinity Episcopal Church in Portland, Connecticut at the time, some 20 miles down the Connecticut River. And I can't tell you exactly why Marcelina's death, among so many other deaths, has had such a lasting impact on me. But since I heard the news report on that day 24 years ago, her name and the image of her slain body has been etched in my memory and carved into my heart. Perhaps it's because there is no way to find meaning in this senseless murder. Perhaps it's because my own twin daughters were 5 at the time, and they often slept in the back seat of my car. What I do know is this, that our little sister's blood cries out to us from the ground, just like Abel's blood. And I believe we know the answer to Cain's question. Well, am I my brother's or my sister's keeper? Well, the answer is, of course, yes. Yes, we are. I remember thinking back then that what we must do, we have to do more to protect our children and to recreate our neighborhoods into places of safety. We have to rethink how we, our community, across the boundaries and divisions that separate us, boundaries of race, of religion, of class, and so often in our society, of neighborhood and geography. I preached about it then. I got some people together and we wrote some letters. And then I moved on with my life. The Hartford Courant ran some stories for a little while and renewed those stories 2 years later when those perpetrators came to trial. But really, we all moved on. We lost an opportunity, all of us in Greater Hartford and across Connecticut. We lost the opportunity to change who we are and how we relate to one another. We lost the opportunity to grasp Isaiah's vision. And I continue to carry in my heart guilt for our inaction. Marcelina. Ben. On December 14th, 2012, 28 people were killed by Adam Lanza in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. 28. 20 children, 6 heroic teachers, his mother, and Adam himself. I remember driving out to Newtown from Hartford once I heard the news. I remember being passed by police car after police car after police car. I spent most of that day and that night at Trinity Episcopal Church, waiting for word from the school and gathering in prayer as people came in and went from the church. One of the children killed that day was 6-year-old Ben Wheeler, a child of the parish. Ben, I came to learn, loved lighthouses, that image that brings the ships to safety. And Ben loved to play in the choir loft when his mother was at choir practice. Of course, parishioners and staff of that parish knew all of the victims, the students, the teachers, and the mother and the son. I'm very proud of that parish and their priest, Kathy Adams Shepherd. And I'm very proud of First Congregational Church in Newtown and their pastor, Matt Krebens, as they immediately gathered the wide community together to hold each other in grief and faith, and over these 5.5 years have continued to hold up one another in prayer and in action. I never again want to have to stand at the grave of a child killed in such a manner, to pray the prayers and silently hold grieving parents. 3 years ago, Ben's mother sent me a picture of a happier time. I keep it on my phone. A bunch of 6-year-olds, Ben right there in the center. were mugging for the camera, wearing little miters, little bishop's hats, in honor of my visit. How can I? How can the Churches United not work to stop the senseless evil of gun violence? Every year at the anniversary of the shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School, the Newtown Action Alliance holds a national vigil for the victims of gun violence throughout our country. We gather usually at an Episcopal church in Washington. It's a time to gather to share stories, and oh, how important it is to keep telling those stories and to keep remembering those names, to share grief, to sing, and to pray, and to act. One year, a couple years ago, Francine and David, Ben's parents, came to join us. They're outspoken advocates for common sense gun laws, and they performed a love song. They're both professional musicians. They performed a love song for Ben and for all who had died. And each year for 2 days, we guide families throughout the halls of Congress to tell their stories, demanding action, and all too often being politely dismissed. In 2016, we were joined by the Reverend Jeremy Lucas, an Episcopal priest from a little town in Oregon. That summer, he had heard that a local girls' softball team was trying to raise money to go to a tournament in California. And the idea of how to raise this money was that they were going to have a raffle of an AR-15, a semi-automatic weapon, the weapon of choice, actually, in mass shootings. Jeremy was absolutely shocked, and he knew that he had to do something. He tried to stop the rally. He got the members of his congregation and their discretionary fund to say, we'll give you the money you need to go to use to get to California. We'll give it to you. But the raffle had started, and state law said once a raffle starts, you can't stop it. So he decided instead to use that $3,000 to buy raffle tickets. 3,000 raffle tickets. And he won the AR-15. What he decided to do was to choose to destroy it. Well, in response, he got a whole lot of hate-filled letters saying, you can't do that. He said, I can, and I have to. And he connected with a group of folk in Colorado who ran a little organization called Raw Tools. And Raw Tools said, we'll take your weapon and we'll show you how to destroy it. And then we'll take the pieces and we'll refabricate those pieces into gardening tools. Well, Jeremy came to join us that year, and he brought a trowel made out of that destroyed AR-15, and he gave it to the president of Newtown Action Alliance in honor of the work that that organization keeps doing to fight against the scourge of gun violence. Well, I had a chance to talk with Jeremy over those couple days that year, and I showed him my cross, which he had actually heard about before. And I said, you know, I hope that you can keep a part of that AR-15 and ask the Raw Tools folk or another artist to make it into a cross for you to wear. Because this tells the story of what God's doing. God takes the worst we can do, and in the love of Christ for us, can transform it into the hope of the world. And I said, if you wear this cross, people are going to ask you about it. Even in church where bishops commonly wear crosses, if I wear this one, somebody's going to ask, what is it? And why? It's ugly. It's heavy. Why are you wearing it? And it gives me the chance to tell the story of the people of Mozambique that I shared with the kids. But it also gives me the chance to talk one more time about what God is at work doing, offering us choice to transform the world. Last summer, Matt Crevens, the pastor in Newtown Congregational Church, and Steve Yanowski, a member of the Newtown Action Alliance, gathered a bunch of clergy in Pastor Bonnie's office, mostly UCC clergy, a couple Episcopal clergy, and they came to New Haven to say, is there any interest here? Do you think there could be any interest at all in taking this idea of swords to plowshares and doing something? Well, you know Bonnie. She said yes. And I was fairly new to New Haven. I've been doing this kind of work in Hartford for years, and I said, well, yes. And so I had an appointment already scheduled with the new police chief, and we went over there and told him that we had this idea. And quite frankly, I didn't think we were going to get very far, and he embraced us with just such an excitement. He said, you know, the story of swords into plowshares, it can give a theological oomph to our work for gun buybacks. We've been doing that for years, but it's dribs and drabs every couple times a year. We don't get much involvement. And so he and his administration said, yes, we want to work on this. Well, in December, this last year, 141 guns were turned in the gun buyback, more than ever before. And with the help of Newtown Action Alliance, Yale New Haven Hospital, Raw Tools, we're going to start the process of turning guns into gardening tools, swords into plowshares. In fact, it's already started. The warden at New Haven Correctional Institution has said, we'll give you the space to do this work, and we'll give you the workers. And in a few weeks, Raw Tools are going to come here to Connecticut and teach these artisan inmates how to transform these broken weapons into their new life as gardening implements. And then we're going to take those implements and give them to the community gardens of New Haven, a symbol of the kind of life-giving work that can happen if we choose to have it happen. The artist who made this sculpture, it's from Mozambique, It's from that work of creating art out of destroyed weapons. The artist who created this sculpture, it's called The Saxophonist, said that on a Friday night he went to a jazz club in the capital city of Mozambique, Maputo. And as he was sitting there and he heard the saxophonist, he knew that that country would never go back into civil war. And he went home that night and created this out of destroyed weapons of war. He knew that since the first gathering of guns by the church under that cashew tree that the kids looked at, now 26 years later, over 1 million guns had been turned in and destroyed. He knew that Mozambique had been changed forever. And he put his art to work to show that. I am often tempted to cry out to God, "You promised! You promised that they would beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. But when is it going to happen?" As I see the deaths mount up and the rationalizing of politicians, I despair that Isaiah's vision is just a pipe dream. But then, I remember Jeremy. I remember Kathy and Matt. I remember Denise and Gonzalo. I remember Marcelina, a 7-year-old, and Ben, a 6-year-old, and Tyreek, a 14-year-old, victims of gun violence. I remember David and Francine at the grave of their child and singing among other victims of violence. God's promise made to Isaiah in a time of political upheaval and violence so many years ago still shines for those who are willing to look for it and to act on it. We, each of us, can choose to work toward the end of violence. We have the choice to turn away from weapons of death. We have the choice to listen to the young adults of the March for Our Lives movement. We have the choice to claim Isaiah's vision as our own. We have the choice to honor those who have died by gun violence with our actions and our commitment never, ever, ever, ever to stop until there is true peace in all of our communities. Let us not lose this opportunity.
Yes.
For the love of God. Amen.
Amen.